Are you ready? You think you could tell us what to do? You think you could tell us what to wear? You think that you're better? Well, you better get ready. Bow to the masters. Break it down!
Hi, welcome to another episode of Straight Lions Talk Podcast. If you guys have not been with us before, and it's the first time you've heard this show and you're wondering what it's all about, let me tell you. All we do here is talk strictly Detroit Lions football. Whatever it is Detroit Lions, we cover it, we talk about it, we give you guys the stage to talk about things you guys want to talk about, the things that interest you, the direction you think the team's going. We'll answer these questions for you as honestly and straightforward as we can, because that's what we do here. We try to give you a realistic view of the Detroit Lions. And a realistic view of the Detroit Lions, you can't doubt this, the Detroit Lions going into Soldier Field on a two-game winning streak with the potential for a three-game winning streak and a four-game winning streak at Soldier Field against the Chicago Bears, personally for the Detroit Lions. What an accomplishment that would be for the Detroit Lions to be able to finish the season strong on a high note, winning 3 games in a row. Knowing what is in store for the Detroit Lions in the offseason, a tumultuous offseason it will be, whether it's we do actually change GM and head coaches or if we keep the GM and head coach in their current roles that they currently have, whether that's Sheldon White and Jim Caldwell stay or they both go. Each will be as tumultuous as the other. One will feel like it's giving us hope, where the other will feel like it's not. We'll get into that. We'll get into the game last week against the San Francisco 49ers, a game that had all Lions fans on the edge of their seat thinking, is this another Detroit Lions snafu against a subpar team that we have no reason losing to? Are we laying down again against a bad team? It's happened a lot in the history of the Detroit Lions, and it's a lot of roller coasters we talked about last week. Things have happened for the Detroit Lions this year. We thought this game may be one of those games, but the Detroit Lions were able to pull this game out 32-17, dominated the second half. We'll get into coverage on that game and some things we saw in that game. We'll also talk a little bit about Calvin Johnson staying in Detroit. I don't think it's the biggest story as people are trying to make it out to be, but there's not a lot to talk about for the Detroit Lions due to their poorest record in the 2015 season. But we will cover that. We covered both of those Caldwell GM search things last week and the Calvin Johnson thing. But these are the things people are talking about. These are the things that you guys want to talk about. And we'll also cover a little draft stuff, the direction we think we'd like to see the Lions go in the draft, and some free agent signings, how we'd like to combo some of that together. We'll talk just a little bit about that. We won't get too in-depth with it. But if you guys want to follow us, you can follow us on Twitter and on YouTube, because both of these sites will have our podcast linked to it. So if you guys want to follow us on Twitter, if you haven't followed us before, it's at STR Lions Talk. And if you want to follow us on YouTube, it's YouTube channel STR Lions Talk. We did videos on YouTube prior to the podcast format, and now the podcast will be on YouTube also if you guys want to follow us there. We're working on getting on Facebook as we speak. We're working on getting on iTunes. We're also working on a web page. All this is happening, and the reason this is happening is because of you guys. And because you guys have followed us, we've had the opportunity to partner with NFL Draft Bible. They're a great site for NFL draft information. They've been around about 10 years if you've never heard of them. They do a phenomenal job of covering the NFL draft and the players going into the draft every year. They cover a lot of the big-name guys, of course, but they also cover a lot of the small school guys, a lot of the guys that intrigue everybody. I think the draft is interesting to people because of the complications of it. Even the best GMs only get it right 54, 55, maybe 56% of the time. That's the good GMs that get these picks right. I think everyone's intrigued by it due to the fact that you want to try to find that small school guy from Sanford or from California Tech or from whatever school it may be, small school-wise, and say, hey, this kid here is going to kill it. And then 3 or 4 years down the road, if Brandon Marshall breaks out, and you're like, see, I told you this kid was going to kill it. Or Julian Edelman comes out and says, I told you this kid was going to kill it. He was going to play quarterback, come in, be a receiver, and be awesome. Those are the things that guys especially like to brag about when they're sitting around. And if you want to be that guy, you want to be the brag guy that sits on the couch and say, hey, I found this guy, I found that guy, look how good he is. That team picked him up in the 7th. Why didn't we take him in the 7th? I told everybody we should take this guy. He was going to kill it. You know, the Larry Allens of the world, guys like that, these super small school guys that come from nowhere and just dominate in the NFL and possibly have Hall of Fame careers. If you want to be that guy, get NFL Draft Bible. You can follow them on Twitter. You can follow them on Facebook. You can follow them on their website. You can follow them on Instagram. You can follow them in a variety of ways. Just about any source of social media you want to follow them, they're there. And they're there with great information. Don't forget that. It's in-depth information. It's just not great athlete, potential 7th-round pick. No, he cover a variety of his skill set, his pros, his cons. They go into in-depth information. They actually scout these guys. They have people all over the country in every section of the country covering these guys, whether it's Michigan, whether it's New York, whether it's in Florida, whether it's in Texas, California. They cover all of this. They go to these pro days. They have great information. And if you guys want to be a smarter fan, which is what we always talk about here, being a smarter fan, go to NFL Draft Bible. This is where it's at. This is how you become a better fan, a more informative fan. This is how you can become a better fan of your team by being more informed. It's just a great NFL site to get on to find information. It's incredible. They do amazing things, giving you the information on all the small school guys. They have interviews on their sites with these small school guys. They just interviewed the Clemson quarterback. He's slipping my name right now, and he shouldn't. You guys all know who he is. I'll think of it in a second. But they just interviewed him before the Heisman Trophy candidate. They were at the Heisman Heisman ceremony interviewing these guys. They interviewed the small school guys from Connecticut. Just go there. NFL Draft Bible. It's great. We're happy to be partnering with them. We can't wait for this relationship to blossom and become extraordinary. This is a small company that's growing huge. Get on board with NFL Draft Bible. They have great deals for their books, for their draft information. Just go to it. It's a great site. So with that said, let's translate this into the Detroit Lions and some of their draft picks that had success against the San Francisco 49ers last week. Amir Abdullah being one of them. Matthew Stafford had great success. The Detroit Lions came in to this game on what has been an abysmal season for the Detroit Lions, with so much expectations going into this season, and the way they started the first half of that San Diego Charger game, going up so 24-3 against the San Diego Chargers, or 21-3, whatever it was, when they got out to that big lead, looked at like they were dominating on both sides of the ball with a defense that had lost Sue, and then everything just fell apart from there, and we couldn't get things right till about week 9. And that's where we're at. We started the first 8 weeks with 20 turnovers. We've had the last 8 weeks basically with 4 turnovers. That's been the difference, the turnover situation. Coaching staff changes, GM changes, personnel changes, front office changes. Everything has happened. Anything that could happen to the Detroit Lions this year has happened. Bad calls, once-in-a-lifetime calls. It's just been a whole culmination of disappointment for the Detroit Lions, and this game set up to have that opportunity for the Detroit Lions and for you fans to have disappointment. Playing a poor San Francisco 49ers team, a team that just 2 years ago was in the Super Bowl under Jim Harbaugh, a team that always threatened to be in the Super Bowl under Harbaugh, a team that was physically and mentally tough under Jim Harbaugh, now has Jim Tom Sula as their head coach. They are a very poor offensive team. Colin Kaepernick has fell off the face of the earth. They now have Blaine Gabbert captaining that ship, and there are people out there speculating that Blaine Gabbert may be getting a long-term deal from the San Francisco 49ers. And my response to that is, please let Blaine Gabbert get a long-term high-dollar deal to the 49ers, where they are stuck and saddled with that salary. They have no choice but to play Blaine Gabbert. And please let us play Blaine Gabbert every year, so that's an easy victory for the Detroit Lions. That's what we want to say here at Straight Lines Talk on that subject. But we thought this might be an opportunity for the Detroit Lions to disappoint us after having such a dominant performance in New Orleans the week before at New Orleans, a place the Detroit Lions struggled to play. We thought, hey, this could be a letdown game, but the Detroit Lions usually play pretty well at home. And the way this game started, it started off the way we talked about last week on our show, that this could be, a game where someone like Blaine Gabbert gets right, or the 49ers get right, because earlier in the season we were the get right team, the team if you needed head problems or issues on one side of the ball or another at a position, you could address those issues by playing the Detroit Lions, and you could get right in just about any facet of whether it's defense, offense, player, coaching, whatever it was. It made you look smarter and better than maybe you were by playing the Detroit Lions earlier this season. It was what we called the get-right team of the NFL the first 8 weeks, and that's what the Detroit Lions were. And it started off that way. How many of you out there, go ahead and raise your hand. If you're sitting in your car, if you're sitting at your desk, you're sitting at home, just raise your hand right now. I'm raising mine right now as I'm doing this podcast. Raise your hand and say, for a second there, I really thought Blaine Gabbert was going to come out, throw for 400 yards, 4 to 5 touchdowns, and just scorch the Detroit Lions defense the way that game started. I'll give you a second to raise your hand. Mine's up in the air. Yep, that's the way I thought it was going to go for a second too, and I couldn't believe it. And that has happened to the Detroit Lions in the past. We've had those players have that success against us in the past. I mean, just to name a few, Flynn, Lindy, Glennon, Kyle Orton, Drew Stanton, Case Keenum, Blake Gabbert, all backups the Detroit Lions have lost to since the 2011 season. Those are facts. That's just the way it is. Those are all players the Detroit Lions had lost to going into that game. I mean, backup quarterbacks. I mean, I'm sure you guys all remember these players. I mean, years ago it was sickening to sit there and watch the Detroit Lions play these poor backup quarterbacks, and they just had field days against their vaunted league worst defense that we seem to have every single year. I mean, the first half stats alone, Matthew Stafford 11 of 14, 137 yards and a touchdown with a passer rating of 131.3. Blaine Gabbert 12 of 18, 154, 2 touchdowns, a passer rating of 130.3. Are you kidding me? Blaine Gabbert, we allowed Blaine Gabbert to have that much success against us going into this game. It's freaky, to say the least. I mean, and I was worried there for a while that Blaine Gabbert was going to have one of those days that makes the Detroit Lions as an organization look bad because Blaine Gabbert had that day. And it makes Blaine Gabbert look great against a bad defense of effort from the Detroit Lions in a season in which we've seen them shut down some of the best offenses in the league at times. So, with that said, the Detroit Lions came into this game in my personal opinion, needing this win to give the home fans something to remember going into next season, that yes, we can win these games. We do have the ability to win these games. And they did, and we actually calmed that early storm against the San Francisco 49ers and improved in the second half to actually dominate that football game, which was a nice thing to see. We'll get into some of that in just a second. Some of the early goings on in this game, the Detroit Lions allowed the San Francisco 49ers a touchdown for the first time in the first quarter go all season long, which, of course, the Detroit Lions are the team that lets a team set some odd record or break some odd record that they had going on. But, like I said, we righted the ship. We had a problem stopping the run early on. It was actually an embarrassment that the Detroit Lions were struggling against the run, considering they just signed Daquan Harris just a few days before. Actually, I think it was Tuesday they signed him, and he came in and just blistered the Detroit Lions. Maybe there wasn't enough game tape on him. I don't know. He actually ran 11 times for 73 yards, but he accumulated most of those yards in the first half of the game. He only carried the ball twice in the second half. So it was nice to see the Detroit Lions step up in the second half of this game. Early on, we did a good job coming back. So we got down early in this game. I think we were down 14-3 at one point, and we actually came back with a late touchdown drive in the second half. It was nice to see the Detroit Lions go up in the first half 20-17. I thought we were going to be in a shootout with the San Francisco 49ers, but we ended up shutting them out by being able to prolong scoring drives in the second half and be able to eat up a lot of time. I think one of those drives was like 6 minutes in the second half. But Matthew Stafford was on his game again. Under Jim Bob Cooter, Matthew Stafford's been a whole lot better. We've seen the we've seen the success he's had. He's on pace to have his best season as a quarterback, completion percentage-wise, quarterback rating-wise, not yardage-wise, not touchdown-wise, but possibly interception-wise, things like that. He'll have his best season in those categories under the leadership and guidance of Jim Bob Cooter, and he is the only coach we hear at Straight Lions Talk feel should get an opportunity on the current staff to interview for that position with whoever may or may not be coming into coach the Detroit Lions in this offseason. You know, the game itself, the Detroit Lions did not muster much of a running game. Combined yardage, they were close to 100. It wasn't great. I think they're about 75 yards, looks like, in the game. They threw the ball very efficiently. My boy TJ Jones, the player we here at Straight Lions Talk, said was going to have a breakout season for the Detroit Lions and be that guy that was going to help take the Lions to the next step, that dark horse guy, maybe develop into that missing third wide receiver role, which I do think he is. It's not as fast and as – he's not having quite the season I thought he would have. I thought he would have around 30 to 40 catches, and he'd be a player that you could develop plays around, and defense would have to scheme for just a little bit in certain situations and certain opportunities on the field. And I think he's slowly developing into that, given his opportunities. I think it took this coaching staff, which it does take this coaching staff, a long time to see talent in players and being able to recognize how to use that talent. I think Kyle Van Noy's being misused. I think TJ Jones has not been allowed to do the things he does well. He was doing punt returns and kick returns early in the year, kind of botched one, and for some reason that put him on the bench and didn't give him any opportunities. But early on, you could see the explosion, the big play ability that TJ Jones possesses, and he showed that with his touchdown grab. He only had one catch for 29 yards, but it was a beauty. That was a wobbly pass from Stafford. It was in between two defenders. He knew he was going to get clocked. He ended up catching the ball between like three hands, watched it all the way and caught it, secured it, took the pop, fell into the end zone for his first career receiving touchdown in the NFL. That's a big step. This is a player I think is going to develop over next year and the year after into a great receiver and a great playmaker and a great punt returner and just overall playmaker for the Detroit Lions going forward. It's a nice thing to build on going into next year. I hope against the Bears he gets more opportunities and his numbers called a little more often to give him the confidence going into next year that he will be the man. And I hope the next coaching staff and GM look at him the same way we do here at Straight Lions Talk. I just think the world of TJ Jones, and I think he's the type of player, if we let him go, if he goes to a Bruce Arians, to a Pittsburgh Steelers, somewhere like that has that vision to give these guys that have this athletic ability and this ability to get open no matter what kind of coverage it is, whether it's man, he runs away from man, he sits down in zones. There's something about this guy. I really like him, and I hope going forward the Detroit Lions recognize his ability to be a weapon for the Lions, considering Lance Moore probably won't be there next year. He could fill that third wide receiver role, which has been such a crutch for the Detroit Lions. But enough of my TJ Jones love. Back to the game. This was a game of two halves, no doubt. The first half, the Detroit Lions played Detroit Lions-esque football, where they let Daquan Harris and Blaine Gabbert smack him in the mouth. But for the first time, well, not the first time, this is the type of game that Jim Caldwell can actually out-coach another coach, which doesn't happen very often in the Jim Caldwell coaching carousel, because his whole coaching staff, not just Jim Caldwell, who is responsible for his coaching staff and does take that responsibility, does not outcoach people, but he was able to outcoach Jim Tomsula, which, I mean, that's no big shakes or no great shakes for the Detroit Lions. I mean, he outcoached Jim Tomsula. Great. He made adjustments at half. Great. His coaching staff was able to catch up and outthink Blaine Gabbert and their coaching staff at the half. They weren't really able to outthink Eric Mangini. Eric Mangini was able to get pressure on Matt Stafford consistently throughout the game, and at times was able to disrupt certain drives due to the pressure he was getting on Matthew Stafford from a variety of different blitz packages and pressure situations and stunts on the line. He was able to create pressure that confused a poor Detroit Lions offensive line, which isn't something to brag about, but it was something that was concerning early on in the game, that maybe Eric Mangini had something he was going to be able to accentuate throughout the game and keep pressuring Stafford. But the Lions seemed to get a little bit of that fixed and gave Stafford just a few more clicks to be able to get the ball out. And he was able to do that, and he showed why he should be the quarterback of the Detroit Lions going forward. But for me, like we said, this is a tale of two halves. Detroit's coaching staff finally outcoached someone, but this is a reason why we don't want Jim Caldwell back for the Detroit Lions, because he does get outcoached, and his staff is slow to recognizing what teams are doing to them and adjusting to those situations. He was slow in firing Joe Lombardi and recognizing that his complicated, complex blocking and pass running schemes under certain situations and certain coverages was not working and was not in the best interest of his players and the players he had. Sometimes that's what a GM and that's what a coach has to do, is say, look, we lost these players in free agency. We lost this guy to injury. We lost that guy to this, and whatever it may be. You have to be able to, as a coach and as a GM, be able to say, hey, okay, we need to scrap what we thought we could do, and here's what we can do with the players we have to give us and our players an opportunity to have success in every single game, whether it's defensively, whether it's offensively. I think personally, we just talked about it, they used Kyle Van Noy in a poor way. This is not what Kyle Van Noy was drafted for. Kyle Van Noy was a rushing linebacker that played all over the field, and I understand they're trying to teach him discipline, trying to teach him the game and teach him some of the other aspects of the game, but at certain points you just have to let these guys go and do the things that they do best, which I think, in my opinion, Kyle Van Noy would be great at rushing the edge, kind of like a Terrell Suggs. Let him play like that with his hair on fire. I think he's a better react player. I don't think he's much of a thinking man's football player. Not saying he's dumb, but some of these players are better at reacting to football situations than trying to think out what could happen in situations. And I think Kyle Van Noy is one of those players. I don't think we have given him the opportunity to have success in the NFL, where now people are starting to label him possibly as another second-round Martin Mayhew bust, where I do not feel that way. I couldn't have been more excited when they drafted Kyle Van Noy. I thought we had stolen a first-round, top 15 talent in the second round, and I still feel that way. You see the athletic ability in him. You see some of the playmaking ability. Maybe he's not the best at recognizing plays. Maybe he's not the best at certain things, but find out what he's good at and take advantage of that. And this is what I blame this coaching staff for. They are poor to recognize these situations. We had an offensive coordinator in Joe Lombardi that could not recognize what to do with Calvin Johnson. And this is my point to the whole thing. This is why I don't want Jim Caldwell back. It was a poor effort all year long against some of the top Super Bowl contending teams and their head coaches and coaching staffs. We were outplayed. They were 2 steps ahead of us all the time. We could not outwit them. We could not keep up with what they were trying to do to us. San Diego did it. We came out with a great game plan. I think that's something Jim Caldwell and his staff are very good at, developing a game plan. I think he has a smart staff, but they are not good at being able to change on the fly. And that's something you need. And he was able to do this against Jim Tom Sula. As you saw in the second half, we just totally eliminated the San Francisco 49ers offense, which is a team that averages 14 points a game. They scored 17 points against them, but they scored those 17 points in the first half. At halftime, they're able to come up with adjustments, which is shocking, and they were able to keep Stafford upright, but that's not good going forward. But John Fox is a better coach than Jim Caldwell. His staff is more able to adapt to certain situations, and the Bears have been playing better as of late. So that's something to keep an eye on. If you guys are watching this at home, watch Jim Caldwell early on. If the Lions come out clicking, bang, 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 John Fox makes some adjustments, will Caldwell be able to react, or will he start being 2 steps behind? Because it always seems like when he plays the better coaches and the better run organizations with the better staffs, he falls 2 to 3 to 4 steps behind against Andy Reid, against Bruce Arians. Bruce Arians made adjustments after the first 2 drives. The Detroit Lions had a plan. It was working. Arians scrapped that, ripped all those pages out of the playbook, flipped it to another chapter, bang. They were off like a rocket and didn't look back in dominating fashion. And Terrell Austin couldn't keep up, and Jim Caldwell couldn't keep up, and he didn't have any advice to give them to help keep up. But out-coaching Jim Tomsula in a game that was just pitifully boring. I almost fell asleep a couple times. I wanted to change it. I just got Ray Donovan for Christmas. I was trying to binge watch it, and I kind of thought about starting to watch a couple episodes, but I stuck it out. And I decided to finish out the game. It was a good victory for the Detroit Lions. It was a victory the Detroit Lions really needed, I feel, going into the offseason, just to finish on that 3-game winning streak that we talked about earlier in the show. Beating a team that we should beat. We should have beat this team by this score. We shouldn't have let them score 17 points, but they did. It doesn't matter. They hit us with a few things maybe we didn't know they were going to be able to do. And having a running back that was a lot better than the one they had the week before was a situation that wasn't great. I mean, every 5 minutes, the 49ers were jumping off sides. They had 6 offensive side or neutral zone penalties in the first half. That was the most since 1993 when the Oilers did it. That was I think it was under Rex Ryan's dad, Buddy Ryan. That's, that they shot themselves in the foot by giving us those first downs, by giving us those extra 5 yards. It was ridiculous. They were flagged 11 times for the second straight week. I mean, they're just not a good and well-coached team, and we beat them, and that's what we have to do. You can't fault the Lions for beating a bad team. It's good that we're beating bad teams, because it used to be we couldn't beat even the bad teams, but we were able to do that. So, overall, really boring game. Glad the Detroit Lions won. A positive coming out of this, I think Anquan Bolden may be available. We'll talk about that and our could-be free agent guys coming into next season. Would he be a good acquisition for the Detroit Lions? Would he give us leadership on the offensive side of the ball and accountability? He's a tough guy. I think he's going to be a Steve Smith type of guy. He'll be able to, he can still catch the ball. He can still do a lot of things positive. He's a little older, but could we get 1 or 2 more seasons of productivity out of him at a high level? Maybe not to what he was with Baltimore or with Arizona, but would he be the guy that would help bring leadership to a team that desperately needs leadership at certain positions? So we'll talk about that. But overall, this game, I'm glad the Detroit Lions won. Some of the stats for this game, like I said, Matthew Stafford had a very good game, 300 yards, 2 touchdowns. The running game was kind of bleak. Calvin Johnson played a lot better this game than he did. He actually almost quadrupled his catches for last week from the previous 2 games against New Orleans and St. Louis, I believe. So it was a good victory for the Detroit Lions. We can't argue with the victory. We won't apologize for victories. We just want victories consistently. And we want to be in the playoff hunt consistently every year. And this, guys, is a step in the right direction. But now we go into Chicago. It's going to be cold. I don't know if they got any snow there, but it's going to be a cold game. We are favored to win, just barely. So it's basically a pick 'em game. We're favored by 52% to win. So they actually have the same record as us. But last week, by winning, it guaranteed us that we will not finish last in our division, which is another positive thing in what has been a bleak season for the Detroit Lions. We're trying to find the small positive things here for the Lions. Winning streaks, Matthew Stafford playing better, the emergence of TJ Jones. They're starting to recognize his playmaking ability. Jim Caldwell commented on it. He's a big play waiting to happen. He has a bright future in front of him. He has playmaking skills and abilities. Things like that. Guys stepping up. Reed has played very well in the defensive line. These are the things we're trying to look at. This is the things I want you guys to look at when you're sitting on the couch. Some of the small victories going forward, some of the positives for some of the young guys, some of the core guys going into next season, because this is what we want. I don't want Matthew Stafford finishing the season the way he started it. That would be bad. That'd be bad for Matthew Stafford. It'd be bad for all the fans. It'd be bad for anything that happened going forward, people would say, well, it doesn't matter. We still have Matthew Stafford. But now, since for a lot of people, what we remember is the last thing we see, we are seeing Matthew Stafford have a great game. I hope that continues in Chicago. I don't know how he's going to play in the cold. He usually plays pretty well. Weather doesn't seem to bother him so much because he has that big arm. And under Cooter, they've actually run an offense that adapts to situations. So are they going to be able to adapt to a poor Chicago defense? But a smart Chicago defense under John Fox, he's a defensive guy. He will have that team ready, so we cannot be too lax in this situation. But the Bears overall, they average 22 points a game. They average 21 points a game. We average 22. We're almost just almost identical comparisons. That's probably why our records are the same. All the stats across the board are just about the same. We give up 25 a game. They give up 24. Yards against, we're ranked 16th. They're ranked 17th. We're ranked 17th, they're ranked 16th. Takeaways are about the same. Giveaways are about the same. Penalties about the same. Penalty yards a game are about the same. It's almost identical teams. So this is going to be a close game. This is going to be a game, the Bears game against Chicago in Soldier Field. It's going to be a game that the Detroit Lions, it's going to be who's going to make the mistake, who's going to have the turnovers, who's going to fumble. Is Amir Abdullah going to have fumble problems in the cold? Is Joique Bell going to have fumble problems in the cold? Is Matthew Stafford going to start throwing interceptions, something we have not seen from him since Jim Bob Cooter has taken over? His interception rate has dropped tremendously. I think he's only thrown 4. So what's going to happen? Who's going to make the mistake? Is it going to be Jay Cutler? Is it going to be Jimmy Clausen or whoever the heck the quarterback is for the Bears right now? Who's going to make the mistake in this game? That's what's going to. Who's going to miss the field goals? Who's going to blow the 4th and 1? Who's going to have field position flipped on them? Or special teams could be a big contributor. Is there going to be a block kick, a kick return, a punt return? Those could be critical things to keep an eye on. If someone gets a special teams touchdowns, I think that team could possibly win. Or a defensive touchdown. I think that could be the team that'll win going forward. Get that extra score you don't count on. I think that's how this game is going to go. But I do think the Detroit Lions are the better team. We showed that in the first game. It was at home. We tend to play a lot better at home. But we've played considerably better in Chicago than we had in the years past. But like I said, it'll be a close game. It'll be a field goal game, a touchdown game, something like that. I think it'll come down to who makes the mistake, whether it's going to be early in the game or late in the game. That's where I kind of see this going for the Detroit Lions. But I'm going to go out and say the Detroit Lions are going to win. I think the score will be 27-24 Detroit with a late field goal by Prater to seal what has been a terrible season for the Detroit Lions with so much expectation. But they'll go out on a 3-game winning streak, 4 games against Chicago in Soldier Field. Positive things, guys. That's what we're looking for, just the positive things going forward for the Detroit Lions. And that's where we see this game going for the Lions. Moving on, there's so much speculation that Calvin Johnson won't be back with the Detroit Lions. We're just going to have a quick take on this. We did some of it last week. I think he will be back. We can absorb the $24 million. It is a lot of money. But I do believe the Lions will ask him to take a pay cut, whether it'll come out in the press that, yes, the Detroit Lions have asked Calvin Johnson to take a pay cut. And, if it comes out publicly, that would maybe be more concerning, I guess. That if he says, no, I won't, will the Detroit Lions say, well, we're going to have to cut you? I don't think they will, because it'd be dumb to cut a guy just because he's making $24 million when you're still going to have $30 to $35 million in cap space and not get anything from him, because he is an asset. You could still get something for him. I don't know if it would be what you could have possibly gotten last year when we, again, not to beat this to death, we talked about trading Calvin Johnson. I think he could have got a first-round pick for him because that Megatron aura was still there, and people were kind of not so inclined to look at him as an older receiver. They were still looking at him as the possible 2,000-yard receiver, instant red zone threat, instant threat downfield, instant jump ball guy. But can the Lions convince him to take a sweetheart deal for the team and restructure that contract in a way that will benefit the Detroit Lions now and moving forward in the future, so Calvin can, finish his career the way Larry Fitzgerald is in Arizona, finish it with the Detroit Lions in the Honolulu Blue. It would be great. I'd hate to see him be like a Herman Moore when he was with the Giants. I mean, it just doesn't look right. He wasn't there for a long time, but, I would like to see Calvin finish it with the Lions if they didn't do anything last year when they probably should have. He's one of my favorite players. I mentioned 100 times. I'm glad he's with us. He has such tremendous records. But, this offseason is important for Calvin Johnson, too. He needs to recognize he's not the same Megatron. He's a great player. Can he beat you on the deep routes? Yep. Can he beat you on the jump balls? Yep. Is he still a red zone threat? Yep. Does he still demand a double team at times? Yep. But he needs to recognize he needs to maybe lose a little weight, get a little faster, train a little harder, and learn how to recognize what defenses are trying to do to him and be on a total wavelength with Matthew Stafford in the fact that he'll be able to look at Matthew, the Bill, to recognize what they want to do together, something I don't know if Calvin's really good at, recognizing what defenses are trying to do to him, and be able to manipulate that into success either for him or someone else on the offensive side of the ball. And route running is something Calvin's never been great at. Maybe it's something he should work on hard in the offseason to prolong his career and prolong the success he's had in his career so he's not just a one-dimensional receiver the way he has been in years past. I think he struggled at times learning how to play with leverage, a situation he should win a lot of times due to the size and the physicality he has. I think if he was able to learn how to play like maybe a Steve Smith that learns how to play with leverage and how to manipulate the defender where he wants him to go, and then Stafford could put the ball in a different area because his catching radius is still great, and it's going to be great probably throughout his whole career. But I'd hate to see him dissolve the way kind of Randy Moss did after having that huge season with Tom Brady. He kind of fell off the charts. I mean, and Randy Moss was a better route runner than Calvin Johnson, but they were kind of the same player in some ways. They just physically were so dominant for so long. They didn't know how to do the little tricks, the little things that would help them win against maybe a double team or against a superior corner or someone that, as he gets a little bit older, will he be able to dominate the way he did? No, he won't be able to. And these corners will be able to keep up with him a little bit. And the corners are getting bigger, they're getting taller, they're getting more physical. But look at him. He should be able to physically manipulate his way up and down the field and be able to, just box out a receiver or a cornerback for the most part. If he plays a little bit smarter, I think it's some things he needs to refine his technique and maybe reinvent himself a little bit as a receiver, but will still be able to have that deep threat ability and have the red zone capabilities of the jump balls and the 50-50 balls. That'll be there. But to be able to just overall bring his game into a whole circle, it's hard. You're probably sitting there wondering, why am I even saying this? Look at his stats. But I think there could be more to him, especially at the end of his career. Like Larry Fitzgerald's now playing in the slot, moving around all over the field, doing a variety of different things, and becoming a lethal weapon that way, not playing the outside position. Maybe something the Lions and Calvin Johnson should consider going forward for the Detroit Lions. But we here at Straight Lions Talk think we should keep Calvin Johnson now. We can absorb the hit. It'd be great if he took the sweetheart deal. He'd be just immortalized in Lions history as the greatest Lion of all time. He'd probably pass Barry in that role because Barry ended on such a weird note. We always wanted more. We were kind of mad at the Lions for it, but Barry ended his career the way he did. Or if Calvin can go out guaranteeing he's going to stay a Lion with a restructured contract, that'd be something, again, positive for the Detroit Lions going forward. Keeping one of their fixtures for the team at a reasonable price for the remainder of what possibly will be his career for the Detroit Lions. He'll be able to go out as a Lion. That'd be something big in a decade and a time where players don't do that. They don't play for just one single team for their whole career. I mean, Peyton Manning hasn't. Look at all these guys. Brett Favre didn't. Jerry Rice didn't. Will he be able to? Randy Moss didn't. Chris Carter didn't. Will Calvin Johnson be able to break that mold and the Lions be able to break that mold by restructuring a deal in the offseason that would benefit him and the Detroit Lions? I mean, he's made $136 million, not just on salary from his contracts, not counting his endorsements. I think the man's got plenty of money. He doesn't seem like he's bad with money. I don't know that for a fact. Maybe he is. But, overall, is money more important to him or staying in Detroit? I guess we'll see which is more important to him. But either way, if he doesn't accept the sweetheart deal, wants to be paid $24 million, I think the Lions should keep him and just and just absorb that contract for the year. Moving on to Jim Caldwell, like we talked about earlier, I don't think he should stay. I know all these rumors are he should get the benefit of the doubt. We've played bad teams, guys. We have not played top-notch teams. We played those Super Bowl contending teams, and I know you can say, oh, Seattle. Well, guess what? Seattle was struggling then, and we couldn't punch them in the mouth and knock them off. Denver was struggling offensively. They had one of the best defenses in the league coming in. We couldn't knock them off. We went into Arizona came in. They punched us right in the mouth, and we couldn't get up. We couldn't keep up with them. Their coaching staff, their players were all out in front. I mean, early in the year, players were saying they knew every single one of our offensive plays, and it looked like it when you watched it on the field. They laughed and giggled about it for 2 or 3 weeks. Caldwell did nothing about it except say, hey, that's the NFL. Everyone knows everybody's plays. Well, it sure didn't on our side. And he didn't do anything to address. He didn't do anything to address the Joe Lombardi situation. He didn't do anything to address player personnel decisions. It was just, and he gets out coached. He's a good before game coach. Game preparation, he's good at that stuff. I think he's good with the players. I think he's good for a team. I think he's good to have on a team, but I don't think he's good to have as your head coach. And currently, that's where he resides with the Detroit Lions as our head coach. So I just want to move on from this because I don't see it getting better. Has he brought us back? Yep, things have gotten a lot better. I mean, we've went 5-2 in the time after week 8. That's a good accomplishment. We possibly have the opportunity to go 6-2. That's great. If we would have started 6-2 and ended the way we started, everyone would still be calling for his job. Like I said before, we remember what we see. If this was flipped, and I know we all kind of got on a roll there when they beat the Philadelphia Eagles convincingly. Hey, we still have a shot for the playoffs. Then we threw up a turd in St. Louis, and then everyone's like, hey, fire Caldwell. That sealed the deal. So which way do you guys want it? I know we remember what we see last before what we saw first, but just take it in sections. Take the first 8 games of the season, flip them to the end of the year. If that happened now, if we were losing consistently, losing the way we did in the first half of the season now, and we won in the first half of the season the way we are currently, it would all be for naught. Caldwell would be out the door, definitely. Especially, let's say, last week we just played Arizona. They did what they did to Green Bay to us. Everyone would be calling for Caldwell's job. He would just about be assuredly fired, So, no, I don't want Caldwell back. I'm not going to try to beat this into the ground every week, but we probably will be talking about it consistently. We may be talking about it next week after the Bears game because Black Monday comes or Black Tuesday, and all the coaches start getting fired because if the Lions are going to make GM moves, the 3rd is the last calendar day of the season. So of the 4th, I believe the Lions can start interviewing and signing GM candidates for the Lions. That'll be something we'll get into next week. I'd like to thank everybody who's joined the show. I'd like to thank NFL Draft Bible. I'd like to thank all of you and all the new people coming into this show. I really appreciate it. We can only do it with you guys. So I'm looking forward to growing and moving forward with all of you guys as well as the Detroit Lions. I'd like to thank everybody. I wish you guys a happy new year. This will be the last show of the 2015 season. The next time you hear from us, it'll be 2016. Possibly a Jim Caldwell firing, a possible 3-game winning streak the Detroit Lions go out on. We'll know where the Detroit Lions are picking in the NFL draft for 2016 under possibly new leadership at the GM spot. We possibly could have a new GM by then or have it narrowed down to a couple candidates that are coming in. If Caldwell's fired, there could be potential head coaches. It's going to be a busy week the next couple of weeks. We'll be here covering it at Straight Lions Talk. Please join us. Until next week, I thank you. Goodbye.